parent of a weird kid. How did you react when you realized that your kid did weird, creepy stuff? Story 1. My kid is into nature documentaries. Very into nature documentaries. One day, when he was 3 years old, my wife was getting his bath ready. She was bent over the tub, checking the water temperature. My son shoved his face in her, took a huge whiff, walked away, and said, dominant female, but I have since realized not only is he into nature and its beasts, but he retains almost anything he sees while watching those educational shows. He is also most likely going to be a man. Story 2. When I was supervising her in the bath, she stood up, dropped her washcloth in the water, stood on it to push it under the water, and menacingly whispered, "Now, think about what you've done." Funny in hindsight, but at the time I was a little concerned that my daughter tried to drown a washcloth. Story 3. My kid is a classical musician. We're the village idiots, so I have no idea where this talent came from, but he is known as the weirdo in the family. Don't get me wrong, we're very proud, and there really is nothing quite so moving as listening to the planets live from some major performing arts center. It has been a real education for us. Alas, we really don't fit in when we attend his concerts, and we're the weirdos. Story 4. Not my kid, but my nephew. He's 10 years old and is being taken out of school for homeschooling. He's had major trouble learning and fitting into the classroom in general. The weird kid aspect is this crush that he has on a girl in his class. I hesitate to say crush, because it's full-on creepy 10-year-old stalking. His parents have had probably 30 talks with him about moving on, and that this girl will not ever see him as anything positive, and that he needs to get over it. He has seen 2 different counselors who recommend he be taken out of any situation in which he might be around her, because he's completely obsessed with her. This causes him to have a panic attack. Because it's part of his identity, his exact words were, "If I'm not the boy who likes, then I don't even know who I am." That's me, I'm the boy who likes. He isn't allowed to have any type of electronics that can take pictures because he took his iPod to school and took a bunch of pictures of this girl. His parents are worried about where this will go. So to try and combat it, they have pulled him out of school, and he's in serious counseling. He's a sweet kid, but holy does he have some major, fundamental problems. Story 5. I baby sat the neighbor's kids. When the parents went out, the little boy, around 6, told me, "I'm going to kill Mummy," and took me to the top of the stairs where head tied string across the banisters at ankle level. Story 6. I don't know if it's creepy, but my son loves fat bellies. When he was younger, he used to hug people and smush his face in their bellies. He always liked our fat friends the best. He's 7 now and still keen. I have to remind him that ladies don't like being told they've got a nice, big, squishy belly. Story 7. My 3-year-old daughter loves old monster movies. I'm in the habit of putting a movie on while I clean the house. I plugged on King Kong 1933. Next thing I know, my daughter is enthralled. She can't stop screaming, "What's that, a monster?" and crying when Kong kills a dinosaur. I asked her 5 times if she wanted me to stop the movie and got an emphatic no. Since then, she's gone on to fall in love with Ray Harryhausen films and Godzilla films. She cries her eyes out every time Mothra leaves Earth in Godzilla versus Mothra: The Battle for Earth. My wife was concerned that a 3-year-old actually enjoys crying and watching movies that make her sad or scared. I just shrugged and found some old Kong and Godzilla toys on eBay. When her friends or girls come over, she tries to get them to play monsters. They look at her like they have no clue what she's asking. I was a weird kid myself, so my only hope is that I can convey to her that there is nothing wrong with being into things other kids aren't, that it makes her unique and cool and interesting. Story 8. My son has said that when he kills someone, he'll put their body on the train tracks, so no one will know they were murdered. And then he said if anyone saw him have to put their body on the train tracks too. He was 6. I embrace his dark side. ITLL help out a lot in the future zombie invasion. Story 9. I come home from work one night to find my darling 2-year-old blonde daughter standing at the top of the stairs staring up at the full moon in her jammies, teddy bear in hand. She should have been in bed by this time. Not wanting to scare her, I walked up the stairs, knelt down next to her, and asked her what she was thinking about. I was imagining she would say something childish like, "Is the moon really made of cheese, Daddy?" Something cute like that. Instead, she turns to face me with a very serious look in her face, and in a very serious and creepy monotone voice, says to me, "We are all in the same cage, 2 years old." I nearly died of fright. I literally recoiled from her and ran back downstairs backwards. I couldn't believe it. She said a few more creepy things like that, but it stopped after a while. Update, that was 12 years ago. She has since turned into a very happy and well-adjusted teenager who is only slightly in league with Satan. Story 10. I've told this story once before on a similar thread. So here goes. My kid hit a dead animal. It's escaping me what kind arm, either or squirrel. He kept it there for a long time, till it began to stink up everything. When found, I thought, oh, am I raising a serial killer? I watched him closely for years. He's fine now, in college, good grades, etc. If he's a serial killer, I have no idea. Story 11. My kid has been the weird kid since about 2 years old. His favorite bedtime stories are the user manuals to my appliances. At 3, he became obsessed with human biology and would watch open-heart surgeries on YouTube. He was also obsessed with vacuums for 4 years. He would spend hours in department stores demonstrating to shoppers how to use them. At 5, his summer plans was to teach himself mechanical engineering and physics. I could go on. When he turned 3 is when I started to suspect he was different. It scared the out of me. He was my firstborn, so I had no idea if he was developing normally or not. His thirst for knowledge became extreme, and I didn't understand how to handle him. So at 4, I sent him to a child psychologist. I was terrified my son would have a nervous breakdown, because although he was so young, he never once in his life, played. All he did was learn. The psychologist made it clear to me that he was gifted, but that I had to force him to play. Otherwise, he would develop OCD and other disorders. I'm trying to make this short. He is 8 now and still different, but he does play. Sometimes I'm happy he is who he is, but I can see that he has a difficult life ahead of him. He doesn't have many friends, mainly because he would rather discuss the news than some new game or toy. I can say this, though. I don't think he'll ever meet another human being who is anything like my son, and I love that about him. Story 12. He's unbelievably interested in bugs of all sorts in 2nd grade. His class was learning about bugs and their body parts, thorax, abdomen, etc. His test asked him to circle all the pictures of bugs that had mandibles. He got a point off for not circling a mosquito. He went and talked to the teacher and told her that the mosquito has a proboscis, not a mandible. She gave him the point back. Edit, it's me, in the weird kid who likes bugs. Story 13. All these weird stories reminded me of this thread about kids. Say, I was visiting family for winter break in Los Angeles. This was about 5 years ago. I was heading to the bathroom on the 2nd floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin, April, on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, I'm copying the lady with the braid. I looked around. There was no one else but us. I asked, where's the lady? April. She pointed to a beam running parallel to the stairwell. I asked April, what is the lady doing? She said, making funny faces. I smiled and started walking up the stairs again, when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. April, her braids is around her neck. I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed. The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces. Then April started making a face, which I then realized was it someone gasping for air. Creepy as. And I don't care what people say about Renasleep. It's exaggerated at best. Story 14. Not my kid, but my niece. A few months ago, I read a similar thread, and later that night, just for fun, I asked me brother and his wife if their kids ever did any creepy. They both immediately looked at each other and seemed surprised that I had asked. Apparently, the last couple of weeks, they would hear my niece talking to herself in her bedroom. They assumed it was just playful imagination, so they didn't give it much thought. One day, however, my brother asked her who she kept talking to. She said it was her new best friend Satan that visits her at her window every day. Her window is close to the ground, so they were seriously concerned that there was someone actually going up to her window and kept a closer eye on her for next few days. Every single time they would hear her talking, he would go outside her windows, but never found anyone. They began asking her more about his new friend, and apart from his name being Satan, she mentioned, hey, he follows her everywhere she goes, and that he promised her he will bring her a cake one day. At a late cookout at my parents a week before, they mentioned that she took her mom outside to heat backyard and pointed at the pitch-black backyard and told her that her friend Satan was there and she wanted to meet her also. That made chills run down my spine since I was at that cookout also. After that, they made her promise she wouldn't talk to Satan anymore. Haven't checked with my brother how that worked out, though. Update. So I got a chance to talk to my brother, and not much happened since then. After all of that happened, since they know it was not someone actually at her window, and to not scare her, they kept close attention who she brought up in conversations. A while of not hearing about it, my brother and his wife asked her about Satan, and she just said she doesn't see him anymore. They haven't heard about him since then. That was about 6 months ago. Now the only friends she talks about are her soccer team friends. By the way, she's 5. Story 15. My son is obsessed with roller coasters that he runs around the house making whooshing noises and banking at the turns. He's 13. In the law of averages, someone has to be below the average line. My son is weird, and I have accepted that he will be the weird kid in school. In fact, you're welcome that you could say at least little Billy isn't like that kid. Story 16. I was reading on our porch the other day when I heard my 11-year-old stepson say he was going for a ride around the neighborhood. I said okay without looking up from my book, then saw he glide down our driveway on a Razor scooter in a Grim Reaper robe. He's not creepy weird, just entertaining weird. He also had his sister perform a wedding for him and our dog last year, and won't let the joke go that the dog is his wife. Edit, thanks for the concern, but he is not the dog. Shame on you, Reddit. Story 17 with love. My daughter has Asperger's and is about to start her second year in middle school. Middle school girls aren't known for their empathy, and while we've worked tirelessly for about 10 years to help her get along socially, it's exhausting for her, and she's probably the weird kid at school. She's got a small number of friends that will hang out with her individually, and not during school time, but get them in a group situation at school, and the larger social dynamic of middle school girls kicks in, and she's left out. So yeah, my daughter's the weird kid. She's also loving and funny and an honor student and into anime and Minecraft and theater. Story 18, not a parent, but a friend of mine, is extremely weird, and I wonder myself how his parents react. He has several weird tendencies. He absolutely refuses to get a smartphone. He has an old Nokia, and even after we tell him eventually there will only be smartphones, he counters this by purchasing 100 of these phones on eBay, just in case. He has no problem having one of us look stuff up on our smartphones, though. He hates condiments and meat on sandwiches. When he goes to a deli, he gets just bread and cheese, nothing else. He is terrified of alcohol. Once someone put vodka in a drink of his, he took one sip and had to go to therapy. Edit, I forgot he also still sleeps with one of those safety bars on a bed to prevent you from falling. He's 27. He's a good friend, just very different. Story 19, the little boy my granda took in is really creepy. But no one else sees it but me. He's obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's and guns. He has so many toy weapons it's worrying. He also likes to tell me in detail how he is going to kill me and my grandma. All he does is sit at the computer and play Minecraft. He makes these really complicated machines to kill NPCs, and then he laughs when they die. He also likes to attempt to get into the bathroom when anyone is doing anything in there, so he can watch. Edit, it's not any one of these things that make him creepy. It's all of them together. Especially his fascination with talking about and killing fake things. Story 20, my father died when I was about 9 years old. Years later, when I had a son, I named him after my father. When my son was 3, he would build elaborate train sets out of the Brio train set my father gave to me. I would hear him in his room talking like he was having conversation. So one day, I was in his room asking him about another elaborate train he had built and asked him how he figured out on his own. He answered, "Oh, I am not alone. I am with my friend Mike, my dad's name, and his name. He always helps, and by the way, he says he loves you." I never knew what to say or do when he played with Mike. I guess I just have to believe it was what it was. Story 21, weird kid here, was adopted by my grandparents in my teens, but they basically raised me. Spent a lot of time there growing up months upon months and years. Parents were abusive, I'm bipolar, and was pretty obsessed with death, self-mutualization, anything sad, dark, or scary. They never addressed it outright, but took ample time to assure me that I was loved, had support, and sent me along to do tasks on the farm that I hated, but later appreciated many times I came home drunk or high, and they would just ask if everything was all right. I'd say yes, stumble into my room, and write. The next morning was always greet with a hug and attempt to feed me breakfast, and a task to do. Be homework, actual work, or a soft suggestion to see friends. Looking back, what they did wouldn't have worked with a lot of other kids. Never would have sobered up ECT, but they really knew me better than I did. Though after listening to Manson a bit too loud, they introduced me to Pocom music. Still don't enjoy it, but it always makes me smile. Story 22, I guess my son was weird from conception. He rarely moved and laid transverse the entire pregnancy, right up to delivery. After he was born, he had to be held all the time. Ended up just getting a sling. He would scream for a good 2 hours every night for no reason. I always said he was releasing his frustrations. Refused to sleep on his crib as a baby. The only way to get him to sleep was bundled up in his car seat. As he got older, he had some quirks that I just chalked up to his personality. Obsessed with cars and would run them back and forth in the dirt for hours. He was a quiet kiddo and played alone for hours. Had to be very careful with movies. If things got sad, like when Bambi's mother died, he would sob for hours. When he started preschool, his first week was spent under the table. When he was in kindergarten, the teacher started dropping hints. He's an odd yet lovable boy. Prefers to be alone. Gets upset over odd things. First grade, it finally became obvious to me we had issues. The day he walked out of his classroom on his hands and feet to meet me, I knew we had something going on. He also wore sweats because jeans were too hard. Had to have cold blankets, aka sheets, at night to cover up. Spend hours and hours playing with Legos. Socks and underwear were huge problems. Eating was an issue. He'd get stuck on a food and only eat that for weeks. He had no friends and didn't want any. Said other kids bothered him. Had him evaluated, and yup, autistic, not Asperger's, as he had some serious speech issues. He's now 22, on disability, and happily living his life. He still has no friends and doesn't want any. He spends his day playing video games and watching documentaries on Netflix. Just pray he doesn't want to talk to you about it. because he will go on for hours and hours and hours. LOL, in a way I'm jealous. I wish I could be so content with my life. He just goes with the flow, as long as things don't change. LOL, he has no wants. Not because he has everything, but because he's just content with what he has. He only sees today, has no concept of planning for tomorrow. He totally lives in the moment. Story 23, as a creepy kid growing up, I can tell you what not to do. I spent most of my childhood silently watching people and catching bug by myself. My mom had zero clue what to do with me, so, although she was never anything but well-intentioned, treated me the same as my outgoing, overachiever older sister. She pushed me to join groups and do things, and that made me withdraw even more from other people, and she would be furious when I inevitably stopped going or hid or ignored people and just read a book instead of whatever thing I was doing. Needless to say, that was not helpful for a kid already showing signs of a severe anxiety disorder. And when my dad died when I was 12, I felt like I also lost my only advocate and friend. I went into a shell that I wouldn't emerge from for a decade. It wasn't an easy way to grow up, and at 30, I still struggle with anxiety and avoid personal relationships, mostly because I didn't develop the social skills as a kid needed to make friends. I have no idea what I'm doing, Mom, who has mellowed considerably from when we were kids, actually apologized to me for the treatment. She did the best she could, but realized that I would have probably benefited from support and encouragement more than anger. I also probably should have been seeing a therapist throughout childhood. C'est la vie, I suppose, but I would highly encourage anyone with a weird, creepy child to listen closely to them, avoid anger, and to not be at all shy about getting them to a therapist. Story 24, my daughter is super weird. Not in a creepy way, but in the way that will most likely get her picked on as she gets older. We embrace it. Make sure she knows that being weird is not only okay, but a good thing. That makes her unique. When the day comes that she does get picked on, it's gonna for her. Not as much as it's telling her not to be herself would, though. Hopefully, if we reinforce that it is okay, and that she should be proud of it, she will brush the mean things kids can say. Story 25, male cousin of mine, 12 years old, asked several of my female relatives, and even my girlfriend, if he could give them foot massages while we were on vacation Lake Powell. It got to the point where he was very forward and pressing to give the foot massages and making people say no 3 to 4 times before moving on to someone else. I'm pretty sure he is on the autism scale, maybe Asperger's, creepy nonetheless. Story 26, my daughter, age 5.5, is the weird kid in her class. She's odd in a number of ways. She's super smart, can read at an adult level, not exaggerating, and she's friendly towards other kids, but she just plays differently. She spends about 80 of her playtime pretending to be an animal. Usually it's one particular animal that she obsesses over for months, then she moves on to another. For well over a year, literally her entire world was chickens. Now she's moved on to guinea pigs. She also is very much into the darker, macabre side of life. She talks a lot about dead bodies, cremation, zombies, and the like. She enjoys spending time in the cemetery near our house and checking out the graves. She's also pretty unemotional about stuff that would really upset other children. She tells me she never misses me or her dad when we're not around, and she was the only one of us that didn't cry when we put her dog down recently. She told me I shouldn't cry so much because we all knew he was going to die soon. I think she's an amazing child, and I love the out of her independent little spirit, but it definitely takes other kids and adults by surprise, and I wonder how she'll get on with other kids as she gets older. She's starting kindergarten next week. Story 27, when my son was around 2 years old, he was obsessed with the phrase "the ship sinks in the water" said something like "esa una agua," for Spanish "el barco ese hund," and "el agua," while making a gesture with his hand, emulating a sinking ship, his hand upside down, bent a little to form a ship, and putting it down slowly. He talked about it constantly, and even asked me for YouTube videos of sinking ships. I used to indulge him to see his reaction, and it was kind of weird to see his glee while looking at those videos. To everyone he met, familiar or unknown people, the first thing Head said was that phrase. He would come to you randomly, say it, and then Head go off like nothing. His obsession has moved to Mario Brothers nowadays. Edit, he also makes comments, since he was little, about his sister who died when he was a baby. He's convinced he knew her, but he never had any siblings. Story 28, my wife's son from a previous relationship is 12 years old, and ever since I've known him since he was 5 still won't talk in a normal person voice or volume. If that makes any sense, he will talk in all sorts of weird, overly animated voices or tones. I asked him to stop talking like that, but I truly don't believe he could if he tried. He is pretty introverted with anxieties we are working on, but that is the weirdest thing. My only reaction to that is it's hard to take anything he says seriously. I have a hard time when I have conversations with him because it bothers me that I don't get a solid answer out of him or feel like we could have a real conversation. After working with him for so long to try and remedy it, I feel defeated sometimes. Story 29, my youngest daughter, around the age of 4 or 5, used to tell me she was going to chop off my head. Eventually it escalated to, "Daddy, if you do that, you're going to chop off your head and cook it on the barbecue." She's 10 now and will laugh with a fondness in her chuckle that she remembers that and still thinks it's hilarious. We told her that, although we laughed our asses off at hearing this, it really isn't funny, and I would prefer to not be decapitated and subsequently cooked on my grill. I'm fairly certain she doesn't want to kill me. Story 30, I was labeled weird in elementary school because me and my best friend were convinced we were dogs and our mission was to fight off the devil. Apparently, dogs were equivalent to angels. Also, we galloped around the playground on imaginary horses, or as we called them, Pegasus unicorns. Story 31, my friend has a friend who has a kid whose behavior is very concerning. At least when she tells me stories about this kid. He is 6 years old, and one day he had a play date with a girl, and both parents were hanging out in the kitchen or whatever. He kissed this girl on the mouth after she told him not to, and then physically covered her mouth, so she couldn't tell on him. Obviously she did as soon as she was free. He also barged into the bathroom when my friend was at their house, and going to the bathroom because he wanted to see her naked. It also doesn't help that his mom still wipes his for him, and being literal here, and B, she still showers with him because he doesn't know how to bathe himself and doesn't like being in the bathtub by himself. He is almost 7. I've never met this kid, only seen pictures, and I shudder every time I hear about him. I don't think he's going to be good at making friends, which makes me sad. Story 32, I was changing in front of my daughter when she was around 2, 5. She grabbed mine and said, "Mama, I like they are pretty." I said thank you, but told her not to touch other people. She can only touch her own. This resulted in full meltdown toddler mode. I don't want to touch I just want to touch her. She still randomly tells me I have nice, and it weirds me out. Story 33, my youngest son is pretty weird, creative, funny, smart, but weird. Last year he was upset because it made him feel isolated. He has friends, but he knows his mind works different from theirs. He isn't on the spectrum. He just makes intuitive leaps and mentally connects information in a way that isn't traditional. I reacted by crawling into his bunk bed with him and cuddling him. I held my 8-year-old and told him that being weird is okay. I told him that I was pretty weird myself, and that while it meant that you wouldn't connect with everyone, the people you do find as friends are going to be true and amazing friends. I told him that being normal was boring, and if anyone ever teased him for being different, then those kids, because it isn't like these are the people he's going to be hanging out with in 20 years. Then we arranged for some counseling, so he could talk to a professional about it, and be reassured that no one is as normal as they seem. Story 34, not my kid, but my niece crushed a baby chick to death with her hands on 2 separate occasions. She was almost 5. Because she was angry, she put on latex gloves to do it a second time after she got angry. So that's one reason I refuse to take care of her. I don't care that she's just an innocent child. She just doesn't care about right or wrong. Story 35, when my oldest was 12, we were walking together, and he was looking at a tree moving in the breeze. He told me that he sees music when he looks at things like that. He's a really talented musician, but not so good in the personal interaction part. I love that kid regardless. Story 36, my daughter is fascinated with death. She likes to talk about it. It really creeps my husband out. Her imaginary friends would get run over and die all the time, but when she was in preschool, the teacher passed around a box, and they had to use their imagination to say what was in it. One kid is like a kitty, another says an ice cream cone. My daughter opens the box and says a puppy, but it's a dead puppy. The other kids were a little disgusted, and one started crying. Oh. Story 37, I know all my parents thought they'd be seeing me on the news someday. As a kid, I had crippling asthma to pass out and nearly die kind, so I couldn't participate in any field sports with the other kids. Plus, I was and still am very uncoordinated in any game involving a ball. However, I was really smart as a kid. I read and comprehended the Lord of the Rings at age 7. I was also fascinated with weapons. My dad showed me how to use his power tools at a pretty early age. So much of my weekends would be spent making weapons in the shed. By the age of 9, I researched and made a set of solid steel throwing knives. To this day, I can hit a hand-sized target of like 10 to 20 feet no bother. I made a Roman gladius sword from an old piece of spring steel and oak. When I was 13, I made this totally lethal recurve bow. I found a huge tree in the forest near our house, cut it down, and got several planks from it. I used an axe and wedges to make rough planks. After its seasoned for 6 months, I fashioned a 5.5-foot recurve bow using a plexiglass steam box and vices to obtain the recurve at the tips. In a local hardware store, I got some ash dowels. I got goose feathers from a local farmer, and I made razor-sharp broadhead arrowheads with an angle grinder. This weapon was ridiculous. It would shoot about 200 yards, so yeah, my parents thought I'd be a serial killer for sure. Story 38. This thread just seems like bait for parents to humble brag about how unique their kid is, while no legitimately weird or creepy behavior is discussed. Story 39. My child is extremely acrobatic. When she was smaller, any attempts to control her were futile. I think she sent at least one other parent into premature labor when it looked like my daughter was going to fall from a high climbing structure. When she was around 4, she started to be aware of the effect she had on adults. I started to say, "Stop that. You're freaking people out," and she would stop. Now at 9, her gymnastics coach is very enthusiastic about her. Story 40. With denial. Then I had him and myself tested and discovered we are the neurologically atypical ones. Now we are appropriately aware and take precautions, meds, etc. It was okay, I guess. Still think all of you are the weird ones, secretly. Story 41. My 8-year-old stepson is incredibly smart, but weird at the same time. He enjoys looking at YouTube videos, so one day hubby and I looked into the history of the vids he's been watching. He looked up what was, and the next video I tried to find the answer of how big Hulk's comic book penis was. Story 42. I am the weird one in my family. The black sheep. I'm obsessed with serial killers. I read their stories. Every single gruesome detail of their killings. I watch scary real-life videos like on LiveLeak and other websites and don't even flinch. On the other hand, I cry like a child if I saw somebody's feelings get hurt. I literally can't see a hurt animal without doing everything in my power to help it. I take care of all the stray cats in my neighborhood and make sure they all get along. I was arrested for smoking pot, which is illegal in my country, and now my whole future is ruined. I collect my own fingernails and use them as toothpicks. My mom hates that. My family aren't really religious, but they're believers. I turn out to be the only atheist in the family. I'm also active, which is extremely frowned upon where I come from. I'm also into weird, not extremely weird, but weird enough for the prudy I find myself surrounded with. I guess it has a lot to do with me being the youngest and only girl in my small family. I come from a small country in the Middle East, is a thing. I tried to rebel, but they never stopped trying to tame me. Once I've raised enough money, I'm moving to Scandinavia, and am never looking back. Didn't ask Reddit for help. Story 43. The Feshy. Hey, the Feshy's daughter. Look at that kitten. It kind of looks like yours, the Feshy's early grade school age daughter. Yeah, I think it's a harbinger of death. Well, at least she's got a great vocabulary for her age. Story 44. I always knew my daughter was odd. She didn't relate well to others and sometimes seemed to be in her own world. A few years ago, when she was 14, she read a book called Look Me in the Eye by an adult with Asperger's. After she read it, she said she really related to the author and wanted to be tested. We went through a few rounds of tests and interviews with a neuropsychologist, and she was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. My reaction was relief. It explained so much about her. All of those weird things seemed normal when seen through the lens of autism. Story 45. When I was waiting with my daughter at school for the doors to open, I watched another little girl trying to stomp on some ants. They won't let me stomp them, she says exasperatedly to her dad. He looks over and says, "What? The ants? That's because they don't want to die, honey," and goes back to his phone. She looks at him, her eyes earnest, and says, "Yes, they do. They said yes, they want to die." She was probably 3. I thought it was cute and funny, but it was also a little weird. Story 46. It's depressing. That's pretty much it. I get stressed out and depressed. My daughter is 7 and hates most everyone and everything when she so feels like it. So she'll be a bright and sunny, happy, normal kid. And then bam, she hates everything. She will attack anyone who tries to cheer her up. Don't try to cheer her up if you don't want a fist to the face. She hates food. She hates games. She hates all people, and so on. I try to get her therapy for this, but everyone I call says that it's probably a fault of my parenting and that they won't see her, but they will see me instead so I can learn how to parent. That kind of makes me want to punch them in the face. Maybe it's genetic. My son is not negative like his sister, but is also the weird kid. He's academically ahead and socially behind, along with forgetful and distractible. His vocabulary and speech habits are odd compared to other kids. Smarter, and yet completely out of touch with normal kid stuff, except when he gets wound up and all he wants to say is he can't fit in with his peers because he's both too smart and too immature. I've also tried to get him therapy for this, but apparently that doesn't exist. They told me to just let him be weird. Fine, if you don't want him to have friends.